Our top focus this afternoon, the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has warned that the developing world is on the precipice of financial ruin. His warning comes ahead of a meeting of the leaders of the group of 20 rich nations, or G20, and big emerging powers this weekend. Antonio Guterres has issued an SOS for developing countries across the world. He says that the developing world is facing escalating poverty, hunger and untold suffering. The UN chief has urged the developed nations to do more to combat the global impact of the pandemic.
Across the board, I'm issuing an SOS for the needs of developing countries. Since day one, I've pushed for a massive rescue package equivalent to at least 10% of the global economy. Developed countries can afford to provide enormous relief for their own societies, and they are doing so. But the developing world is on the precipice of financial ruin and escalating poverty, hunger, and untold suffering. We see tremendous debt vulnerabilities emerging, especially among commodity and tourism-dependent economies, including middle-income countries, and particularly small island states.
A family photo of G20 leaders was projected onto the Salwa Palace in Saudi Arabia during the opening ceremony of what will be a mostly virtual summit this year. Top of the group of 20 major economies agenda is a COVID-19 action plan and measures to stem the pandemic's impact on global economies, including debt relief for the poorest countries. US President Donald Trump will also participate in the virtual G20 summit this weekend. An official from the Trump administration claims that the US president will be involved in G20 events both on Saturday and Sunday from the White House. The head of the International Labour Organization says that an equivalent of 225 million full-time jobs were lost in the group of 20 countries in the third quarter of this year. Guy Ryder further says that the situation is bleak and will not improve even by the end of the year.
We are all still struggling with a crisis of unprecedented scale, and the impact on employment remains daunting indeed. ILO data indicate that an equivalent of 225 million full-time jobs were lost in G20 countries alone in the third quarter of 2020. And there has been a global decline in labour income of more than 3.5 trillion US dollars.
Meanwhile, the World Health Organization's chief, Dr. Tedros, hailed the role played by the said G20 in the development of potential coronavirus vaccines.
G20 countries have played a key role in the rapid development of vaccines, diagnostics and therapeutics for COVID-19. And we also appreciate the support of most G20 countries for the access to COVID-19 tools accelerator and the COVAX facility. Fully funding the ACT Accelerator is now essential for realizing its promise.
Now, for more details about the upcoming G20 meet, our principal diplomatic correspondent Siddhant Sibil joins us on this broadcast from New Delhi. Siddhant, thanks so much for joining us this afternoon. So now we know that the COVID-19 action plan as well as reviving the global economy will be on the agenda of discussion. But some strong words coming from the UN chief Antonio Guterres there, almost an SOS plea for developing economies. So what can we expect from the G20 summit this year?
Well, Priyanka, one of the biggest outcome which the G20 countries are discussing is debt relief for developing countries. In fact, this is the second G20 virtual summit of this year. There was an emergency summit of G20 grouping earlier this year in which the focus was on debt relief, and India, along with all the G20 countries, started working on it, and many African countries were given benefit, relief that they can pay the debt later on, perhaps after 6 months, perhaps after a year, and the deadline is also being planned. But by and large, we know it's the COVID pandemic that is the top focus in this year's virtual summit and its economic impact as well. Remember, G20 is primarily an economic grouping. It came after the 2008 financial crisis. Since then, it has also been taking a major lead in political role as well, given the fact that how dysfunctional United Nations has been. So largely, it is now up to the group of 20 big economies to decide on major things in the world. In fact, it will be better to call as the rules of the game internationally today are governed by these 20 economies. In fact, the Indian Prime Minister has been talking about the issue of black money at this grouping, and this year will be no different. In fact, India's Sherpa to the G20 grouping, Suresh Prabhu, talked about it exclusively to WION, talking about how black money is something that has been the focus of the Indian Prime Minister from 2014 G20 summit, when the first time the Indian Prime Minister participated in the G20 summit. That year it was in Australia. So this year, among other issues, India will be focusing on the issue of black money and the issue of terrorism, something that India has been focusing on other groupings as well. This G20 summit, which is due to start virtually in few hours time, will also be the third time the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Chinese President Xi Jinping will be sharing the platform together. They've already shared the platform together at the SCO virtual meeting and the BRICS virtual meeting, which happened earlier this month.
Right, Siddhant, another key figure that everyone will be watching will of course be outgoing US President Donald Trump, who will be attending the virtual affair as well. What can we expect from him in his final days in office?
Well, everyone will be expecting him to perhaps act like a normal leader, because in the past what the US President Donald Trump has been doing, he has been vetoing the joint communique which has been decided by all the Sherpas of 20 countries coming together. The fear is he might just create a spoil sport at the end of it. We know that in the previous summits there have been such instances. In fact, one of the big focus usually ahead of G20 summit is the big family photo, which we have seen this year as well. This year, of course, it's the virtual family photo, so no news coming out of that family photo. But in the past, these family photos, in-person family photos, have been a venue of deciding how world leaders behave with each other. In fact, when the G20 summit happened in Argentina, where WION was present, the President of the United States just went past the host country's president. That was an embarrassing moment. And in fact, after the Khashoggi killing, we saw the body language of the rest of the 19 leaders compared to what the Saudi Arabian leader MBS had to face. So kind of isolation he faced from the world leaders. And of course, these bilaterals, it provides an occasion of bilaterals as well. Every time there has been a G20 summit, there has been a meeting of Russia, India, China, as well as that is Japan, America and India meeting as well. This time, of course, it's not going to happen because of the virtual meeting, and it was expected to be an occasion for Saudi Arabia to showcase itself, an occasion to showcase its reform, primarily a coming out party for Saudi Arabia. But that, of course, will be missing this time. India, of course, going to host the G20 summit in 2022, and already India has started to construct a state-of-the-art secretariat here in New Delhi.
Right. All right, Siddhant, thank you so much for all your inputs on this story, and we will, of course, be tracking all the developments and outcomes of the G20 summit.